The demilitarized zone dividing the Korean peninsula. It's become a favorite stop-off place for Trump administration officials. The president himself had reportedly been toying with the idea of a stop here during his state visit. At the end of the Korean War, prisoners were exchanged over the bridge you can see behind me. And even a few years ago, there were still economic exchanges and very brief family reunions. Now, the only thing being exchanged are insults, and most of those are being traded between Pyongyang and Washington.
Never yield.
That exchange of angry rhetoric has left many South Koreans feeling sidelined and vulnerable.
Our great American flag.
Not so much because South Korea and the US have different approaches to dealing with the DPRK, which they do, but because US policy seems increasingly driven by spontaneous tweets.
There seems to be a lot of dysfunction within the executive branch and in the White House these days, and I'm not seeing much coherence and any kind of coherent strategy for foreign policy or national security policy.
During his two-day, one-night state visit, Donald Trump is also expected to take South Korean President Moon Jae-in to task over the two countries' free trade agreement, which Trump has threatened to rewrite or rip up. South Koreans wonder why their country has been singled out, given the US has a much larger deficit with countries like China, Japan, and Germany.
And none of these countries have a trade agreement with the U.S. So having huge trade deficit is not because you have a trade agreement. It's because of something else.
Trump probably won't dwell too long on differences over free trade or security policy. After all, he will be treated to the first full state visit here by a U.S. president in a quarter of a century.
Any kind of big deals or agreements to be signed between the two heads of state, I'm doubtful on that, but reassuring South Korea is an important part of the president's job.
Worried about security at the DMZ, South Korea's president has instead invited Trump to visit Camp Humphreys, a large U.S. military base south of the capital. Ahead of Trump's visit, Seoul and Washington had already agreed to step up joint military exercises. While in South Korea, Trump will also become the first U.S. president to address the National Assembly here since Bill Clinton in the early 1990s. Jack Barton, CGTN, Seoul.